That's actually a joke. I forget that, oh, I did publish a book. The longer that we wait to do the things that he tells us to do, we're taking a risk that we might not even wake up the next day to be able to do those things. Like, that should be a criminal offense. Hello everyone, welcome back to season 2 of the Singled Out podcast. Hello guys, editing me here. So this is In My 20's Diaries, formerly known as Singled Out. And I just wanted to clear up any confusion that when I filmed this clip, we were still going to go with Singled Out. I can't believe we're back and I'm so excited. I'm your host, Denise, and today we're going to be talking about some really juicy things. Okay, so first things first, I wanted to share what's new on the podcast. Number 1, we are in digital format. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube right now, you should know that this is a new part of Singled Out. I was a radio host on 99.1 WKEE for a little while, and whilst on there, one of my biggest frustrations was that we didn't have a digital version that you guys could watch. So if you guys are on YouTube, drop a comment right quick down below with your favorite emoji, and also make sure that you press that big fat subscribe button because we're going to be doing podcasts every single week and I don't want you guys to miss out. The second thing that is new on Singled Out this season is that we have a new website. The website name is authorgabrielledenise.com, and you can check it out in the link in the bio. So if you guys ever miss a podcast episode, you can go on there and see exactly what we talked about. So the first thing that is out for 2024 is not showing up for myself. I have been doing a lot of thinking during this time in the podcast break, and I figured out that I was in a lot of people's cheering sections this year, but I was ultimately not there for my own self in my own cheering section. And it makes me a little bit emotional because in 2022, I published Since When Did Single Mean Sad? And it was by far one of the biggest accomplishments I've ever had in my entire life. And then as soon as that happened, I completely stopped showing up for myself. And it led to me selling like maybe not even 100 copies in 2023. I took my book off of all the platforms that I knew was working. I stopped talking about it to friends and family, and just overall I put the book on the back burner. And I know a lot of you guys might be wondering, like, why is that? Because you would think that once you have success that you would just keep going. When you achieve your dreams after you have a dream in your heart for so long, sometimes it can be really overwhelming. Because for me, overnight I went from just being Gabrielle, this like small town girl that not that many people knew, to this author. And suddenly people were coming up to me and they were talking to me about my book and saying how much they loved it, and all of a sudden, like, I was this other person. Like, I was an author and I didn't know how to deal with that per se. And so it sent me into a little bit of, I wouldn't say a depression, but a little bit of like a turtle stage where I needed to like figure out who my new identity was as an author. Because even to this day, like when people come up to me and they start talking to me about my book, I have this moment where I have to switch back into author mode because I forget that, oh, I did publish a book. The second thing that isn't out in 2024 is trying to do everything myself. So it is my hope and dream that in 2024 I will meet my future husband, but that's actually a joke. I really am focused on cultivating strong friendships and relationships. I know my worst period of my life was in 2021, and that was the time of my life when I thought that I could just be independent and I could do everything by myself and on my lonesome. And I quickly realized that I need people to be successful. And I'm actively working to create a space for myself where I feel comfortable asking for help. The next thing that is out in 2024 is sleeping around. I made a big mistake sleeping around when I was in college, and I thought it wouldn't have an impact on me, but it actually really did, especially when I ended up losing my virginity. It was one of the biggest learning experiences in my life, and to this day I look back at it and I thank God, because even though I slipped up, I learned so much about myself and who I was as a person. And that was one of the things that I'm going to talk about in my upcoming video, so make sure you guys tune in for the next podcast. I can't wait to talk about that. But sleeping around is just not good for any parties. I feel like everybody gets hurt by it, And even if you could pretend that it doesn't bother you, it's just not something that God intends for us to do. Like in the Bible, it tells us to flee from all immorality. It talks about how sex is one of the biggest things to God because it's the thing that happens inside of our bodies. So we have to be so careful that we keep our temples clean. The next thing that's out is staying in things for too long. So recently I got diagnosed with ADHD, and one of the things I realized is that the reason I was staying in things for so the reason I was staying in things for so long was because I felt guilty that I was moving on from things so fast. But now that I look back, I realize that I have to give up things in order for God to bless me with more. For example, if I had stayed in my phlebotomy job, there is no way that I could have been happy in the job and career that I am in now. So I had to let that go. And God really loves it when we trust Him enough to have open hands so that He can bless us with more. The next thing that is out in 2024 is procrastinating. I read this really cool thing, or I don't know if I read it or if I saw it on Instagram or TikTok, and it said that procrastination is basically assuming that God is going to give us another day to do what He already says that we should do. And that really hit me in my chest, because how many times do we take it for granted that we wake up the next morning? Like, God never promises us another day. So the longer that we wait to do the things that He tells us to do, we're taking a risk that we might not even wake up the next day to be able to do those things. And so I'm no longer going to sit around and just wait for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment is now. And the last thing that is out in 2024 is smoking and drinking. So I used to smoke and drink a lot, and in fact at one point weed was my way that I was making it through the workday. I was finding a lot of trouble with like the loud noises and always feeling overwhelmed at my job, and so I had this group of friends where like after work we would smoke and it would just help me out a lot. But I recently realized that every day or every time that I smoke, I wake up the next morning and I have a severe brain fog to the point where like I can't even function correctly. And so I realized that I need to like take a break off of that. And as soon as I started like taking a break from alcohol and smoking, I noticed that my productivity went through the roof, and I am so proud of myself for how far that I've gone. So I don't plan on turning back to smoking and drinking anytime soon. Okay, so now that we talked about the outs of 2024, let us talk about the ends of 2024. This I feel like is the most important part, and I only have 3 things, but each of these things has made such a big difference in my 2024 so far, and I really want to keep them in. Number 1 is cultivating an active lifestyle. So I'm gonna admit something to y'all, and y'all have to keep my secret for me. I hate going to the gym. I don't know if it's something about the sweat particles that I imagine like flying everywhere, or if it is like the possible staph infection that you get from unwiped equipment, or if it's just like the fact that it always just seems to be loud and distracting. Like, I just really don't like going to the gym. But for the longest time, I felt so guilty about that, because I felt like the gym was like one of the only places that I could go to work out. And please comment below if you agree with this, because I just felt crazy for so long. But anyway, what I figured out is that I can just exercise wherever I want, and that it doesn't really matter where I exercise as much as it matters what I am doing. So now, like, I have 2 things that I really love to do for exercise. Number 1 is I love to do ballet classes because they're very slow and they allow me to really stretch my muscles, gain that strength and that flexibility. Number 2, I love to do some type or form of cardio, and I like to frequently switch it up, but I found that those 2 things have made me so happy. And one thing I realized with ADHD especially is that when I don't exercise, my brain does not function as well as it does on exercise. There's something about that natural dopamine of like going outside or going to wherever and just getting some energy out that really helps me throughout the day. And I also noticed that as soon as I cultivated that active lifestyle, my skin started clearing up. Like all the pimples and the oily spots I used to get, they went away. And I think it has something to do with like the flushing process that your body goes through when you go and exercise and work out. The next thing that is in 2024 is meeting people in person. I feel like social media has really got us spoiled lately, and I find myself a lot of times building these parasocial relationships with people who don't even know me. But I realized that I need social connection, and more than that, I need social connection outside of technology, outside of social media. Like, as I have cultivated friendships outside of social media, I felt so much more happy, so much more free, and like I'm actually living life. You would be so surprised about the number of people who have like hundreds of thousands of followers, but they feel lonely on a daily basis. It's not normal for us to spend 16 hours on our phone every day and be talking to all of these random strangers online. We are not meant to live life like that. And the last thing that's in 2024 is prioritizing my relationship with God. So my relationship with God, I feel like, started in 2022, but recently in 2023 I actually got baptized again because I felt like I came back to Jesus after a whole tumultuous and crazy year. Over time, there have been moments where I've said, oh, you know, God is great, but like I have other things to do. And those were the moments where life got so crazy and insane. And so now I'm just working on inserting God into every decision I make in my life. So whether that is praying for my food, or whether that is praying before I go and drive anywhere, which is so important, or whether that is stopping every day to be grateful and write gratitude journals, or whether that is stopping on the weekend and writing down my favorite things from the week and what I looked forward to and what I was blessed with. We have to sit down as Christians and take time to spend time with God. And that's why I read somewhere someone said that Christianity is a relationship. If you have a relationship but you never spend time with that person and you're always like putting them off to the side, how can you expect that their relationship is going to grow and flourish? Let me know down below, what are your ins and outs for 2024? Okay, so the first thing that I learned at 23 is that you have to do things for you. I feel like 23 is one of those really weird ages because for the first 12 years of your life, you're in a situation where everything is put out for you. You know when you're supposed to go to class, you know when you're supposed to go to school, you and your peers are all in the same school age group, so everything is very put together. And then you go to college and you're supposed to choose what you want to do for the rest of your life. I still don't understand that, and I still don't understand giving 18-year-old the key to getting into hundreds of $1,000s worth of debt. Like, that should be a criminal offense. But once you get to the age of 23, you're no longer in school anymore, and so you kind of hit this really weird cascade. And at this point, it can become really tempting to just look at what your parents and everybody around you wants you to do, because often these people are very vocal about what they want. And I know for me, my parents, no shade, no tea to them, they were very interested in me going into the medical field. And we had talked about this since I was like 7 years old. And I kind of knew that I didn't want to go into the medical field. For reference, I have a pretty big fear of blood. I don't know what the fear of blood is called, but I decided anyway that I was going to pretend that I didn't have that fear, and so I decided to get a career as a phlebotomist. Now, I don't know if you guys know what a phlebotomist is, but basically they're the people who take your blood from you and they like poke your veins in the doctor's office. And I did that for about a good 8 months, and I'm so proud of myself for how long I stayed in that, because my fear of blood, like I was getting blood on me every single day pretty much, and it was pretty freaky. But one thing that I learned is that That career was so not for me, and I stayed in it for way too long, like I talked about over in the ins and outs of 2024. And that was one of the scariest decisions I ever had to make in my life, because me and my mom had worked together so hard to prepare me for a path where I would go straight into medicine. You have to kind of start tuning out what other people want for you and deciding, like, what do you want for you? The next thing that I learned when I was 23 years old is that you have to say no when people try to put you in a box. For the longest time, I've actually been going to 2 separate churches. One of them is my home church, and then the other church is a church that I went to like throughout my whole childhood. People have asked me like, oh, you know, like, which church do you go to? Or I thought you went to this other church or so-and-so's church. And one of the things I've had to do is learn to know that, number one, they're not asking me because they're trying to be rude. And number two, that it's very rare for people to go between 2 separate churches. And I think that this is kind of part of that whole thing of doing what works for you. Like, if you find that you like 2 separate environments, like, it's okay to like go between the 2 of them. Like, that's not a problem. And the reason that people try to put you in a box is so that they know what they need you for. For example, if they know that you give really good relationship advice, they know that every time they come to you, they're going to get relationship advice. But the thing is, humans, we're so messy and we're multifaceted and talented. And so we don't have just one thing that we're good at. And I feel like when we allow other people to put us into a box, it can cause us problems, because as soon as we stop serving in that box that that person needs us for, then we become unrelatable to them and they can throw us away. To my number 3, which is to have realistic expectations of people. I know as a kid, I used to think that my parents were superheroes. They are great people, don't get me wrong, but they've made mistakes as well too. And the biggest difference between me and them is that they have a little bit more life experience. But I have to give them grace, because we all make mistakes. All of us are human. And so when you give somebody the ability to be themselves and the ability to just be human, you realize that everything is not such a big deal anymore. The 4th thing that I learned in 23 is that sugar is so delicious, so addicting, and it's also so harmful for your body. A lot of you guys are probably gonna hate me for this, but they have done a scientific study and they found that sugar is one of the #1 causes of inflammation. And inflammation is what causes things like sugar diabetes, insulin resistance, high blood sugar, and even cancer. And so you have to be so careful about what you're intaking into your body. I've in fact started this thing where I limit my sweets to 1 main sweet per day. What I found is that when I mindfully eat and consume sugar, I feel a lot better. The next thing I learned at 23 years old is that you have to be strong in what you won't tolerate during dating. I used to be one of those people who would say that I would date someone outside of my religion as long as they believed that there was a God, and then everything else would work out. And where that led me was into a 3-year situationship with somebody who I didn't even end up marrying, and it was a horrible, horrible heartbreak. What I've learned is that most of the major religions in the world have some form of Jesus or God in them. And so you can't just say, oh, you know, if they believe in Jesus, everything is okay. But I just really think it's important that you write out your list of no's, of things that you won't handle during dating, and you stick to that list. And I really go more in depth about this instance when is single means sad. So if you are interested in learning more about that, I encourage you to go onto my website and look into it, because it's like really important. And I saved the best thing for last, which is that time is your most valuable asset. You can get a lot of things back, but you will never get your time back. I have counted the hours of things that I used to do, like scrolling on TikTok and watching YouTube videos, and it really made me upset, because I was realizing that a lot of my time was being wasted away on screens. Your time is so valuable, and you would be surprised at how much you can get done when you just sit down and focus. Like this whole podcast episode, I could film it in about 30 to 45 minutes. or I could just, you know, lay down and take a 35 to 40 minute nap. Nothing wrong with the nap, but one thing is going to move me forward in my business pursuits, and the other thing is just going to have me stay stagnant. And so I noticed that as you grow, one of the biggest things you have to do is make choices on how you spend your time. For you, that might mean setting boundaries with the people that you love most. My brothers, they're in a lot of sports, and one of the things I've had to learn how to do is sit them down and tell them, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it to your games tonight because I have this, and that, but I love you and I'll try to make it to the next game. So that was today's podcast episode. I hope you guys got a little bit of the tea. And now we're going to get to my favorite session part of the show, which is the inspiration station. If you've been following me since my 99.1 WQEE days, you're probably familiar with the Song of the Week. The Song of the Week was a session that I did every single week where I picked out a Christian song to normalize Christian music. And so what Inspiration Station is kind of an expansion on the Song of the Week, where I share one thing from the week that has inspired me or made me smile so that you guys can be inspired too. Today's Inspiration Station is Atomic Habits by James Clear. As someone with ADHD, the process of creating and cultivating habits that not only stick, but that work for me has been a very upsetting experience. I know there have been some times where I've had almost complete breakdowns because I couldn't figure out like how I could get myself to stick to habits. And then I read this book and it really changed my life and changed my perspective. Even if you are not neurodivergent like me, then I definitely recommend that you read Atomic Habits, because it is a great book that is backed up by science that will really help you to put habits into perspective. I found that once I read the book, I was able to start doing those things that I always wanted to do, like learning Spanish, and I was able to put away some of the other things that I didn't really want to do anymore. So you guys can pick up James Clear's book everywhere that books are sold. And once again, the title of the book is Atomic Habits. I love you guys so much, and thank you for tuning back into season 2, episode 1 of the Singled Out podcast. I hope to see you next week, and don't forget to share the love of Jesus with at least one person that you meet today. Bye.